Story 1. Nestled deep within a dense forest far from the nearest town stood an old cabin that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The wooden structure, weathered and worn, was surrounded by towering pines that whispered secrets in the wind. As dusk fell, the shadows grew longer, and the air turned crisp, creating an atmosphere thick with unease. The only sounds were the occasional crack of twigs underfoot and the distant hoot of an owl, amplifying the sense of isolation that enveloped the cabin. Our main character, Sarah, a young woman seeking solace from her hectic city life, decided to spend a weekend in this secluded retreat. She envisioned a peaceful escape, filled with cozy evenings by the fireplace and the soothing sounds of nature. However, as she arrived, an unsettling feeling washed over her. The cabin felt too quiet, almost as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As night descended, Sarah settled in, lighting a fire and curling up with a book. But soon she began to hear strange noises outside, soft rustling, followed by what sounded like footsteps crunching on the leaves. Dismissing it as wildlife, she tried to shake off her growing anxiety. Yet the feeling of being watched lingered, creeping into her thoughts like a dark fog. The chilling events escalated when Sarah noticed that the front door, which she had securely locked, was now ajar. Heart racing, she ventured outside, calling out into the darkness, but only silence answered her. As she turned to go back inside, she caught a glimpse of a shadow darting between the trees. Panic set in as she realized she was utterly alone, trapped in a cabin that felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. The isolation weighed heavily on her, and the forest, once a place of beauty, transformed into a haunting labyrinth of fear. Story 2. In the heart of a sprawling forest, far removed from civilization, stood a quaint cabin that seemed to beckon weary souls seeking refuge. Surrounded by towering trees and a serene lake, the cabin was a picturesque escape, offering a sense of tranquility that enveloped its visitors. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of water and the rustling of leaves, creating an idyllic atmosphere that lulled the mind into a false sense of security. Our protagonist, Mark, arrived at the cabin with his friends, eager to unwind and enjoy a weekend of fishing and storytelling by the fire. The first night was filled with laughter and camaraderie, as they shared ghost stories and toasted marshmallows under a blanket of stars. Mark felt safe and content, believing they were miles away from any danger. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon, an unsettling chill crept into the air, and the forest seemed to come alive with whispers. The following evening, while the group was gathered around the fire, they heard a faint knock at the cabin door. Confused, Mark exchanged glances with his friends, unsure of who could possibly be out there in the middle of nowhere. Hesitantly, he approached the door, heart pounding in his chest. When he opened it, he was met with an unexpected sight. A disheveled man, wild-eyed and trembling, stood on the threshold, claiming to be lost. Initially, Mark felt a surge of compassion, inviting the stranger inside. But as the night wore on, the man's erratic behavior and unsettling stories began to raise alarm bells. The atmosphere shifted from welcoming to suffocating, and Mark's sense of safety evaporated. When the stranger suddenly lunged at him, revealing a menacing grin, Mark realized they had welcomed an uninvited guest into their sanctuary. Panic surged as the group scrambled to escape, the once peaceful cabin now transformed into a nightmarish trap, leaving them to confront the terrifying reality of their situation. Story 3. Deep within an ancient forest, where the trees stood like sentinels guarding secrets long forgotten, there was a cabin that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only light came from the slivers of moonlight that pierced through the dense canopy above. As night fell, the forest transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs echoing ominously in the stillness. Our protagonist, Emily, had rented the cabin for a weekend getaway, hoping to escape the chaos of her daily life. However, from the moment she stepped inside, an unsettling feeling washed over her. The cabin, though quaint, felt alive with an unseen presence. As she settled in, she began to hear faint whispers that seemed to drift through the air, curling around her like tendrils of smoke. At first, she dismissed them as figments of her imagination, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, beckoning her to listen. As the night deepened, Emily's curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The whispers seemed to guide her deeper into the woods, leading her to a clearing where shadows danced among the trees. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and every instinct screamed for her to turn back. Yet she pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable force. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a chilling chorus, echoing her name and sending shivers down her spine. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, darting just out of reach. Heart racing, Emily felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her, and panic surged through her veins. As she turned to flee, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, leaving her to confront the terrifying reality that the forest held secrets far darker than she could have ever imagined. The cabin, once a refuge, had become a portal to something sinister, and Emily was caught in its haunting embrace. Story 4. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, Rachel prepared for what she knew would be her last night in the cabin. The air was thick with an unsettling tension, and the once inviting space now felt like a trap. She had spent the weekend alone, hoping for a peaceful retreat, but instead she had been plagued by a series of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, flickering lights, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Each night had brought new horrors, and now, dread settled heavily in her chest. Determined to confront her fears, Rachel decided to stay up late, armed with only a flashlight and a resolve. As darkness enveloped the cabin, the forest outside seemed to come alive with whispers and rustling leaves, amplifying her anxiety. She could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her, and every creak of the cabin felt like a warning. The clock ticked ominously, each second stretching into eternity. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the cabin, jolting Rachel from her thoughts. Heart racing, she grabbed her flashlight and cautiously made her way toward the sound. As she approached the door, she noticed it was slightly ajar, swaying gently as if inviting her to step outside. A chill ran down her spine, but curiosity compelled her to investigate. Outside, the forest was shrouded in darkness, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a storm. In that moment, Rachel realized she was not alone. Shadows danced just beyond the reach of her flashlight, and a figure emerged, its features obscured but its intent clear. Panic surged through her as she turned to run, but the forest seemed to close in around her, trapping her in a nightmare. The horrifying climax unfolded as Rachel stumbled back to the cabin, desperately trying to escape the unseen terror. The door slammed shut behind her, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. In that moment, she understood that the cabin held a darkness that would forever haunt her. As she fled the next morning, the experience left an indelible mark on her soul, a chilling reminder that some places are better left undisturbed, and some nights are meant to be the last.